If I had walked away that night, my life would have stayed mine. The rain hit the pavement hard enough to blur the streetlights into trembling halos, turning the whole block into something unreal, like a dream you couldn't wake up from. My shoes were soaked through, the soles barely holding together as I dragged myself past another closed storefront, counting the steps between street lamps like it mattered. 43 degrees, maybe lower with the wind cutting through my jacket like it wasn't even there. I hadn't eaten since noon. Not that it was unusual. You learn to ignore hunger when you don't have a choice. I kept my head down, hands shoved into my pockets, moving fast, but not too fast. Fast gets attention, and attention gets you trouble. That was rule number 1. Rule number 2 was even simpler. Don't get involved. Not with strangers. Not with problems. Not with anything that bleeds into your life and refuses to leave. I was halfway down the alley behind 9th and Mercer when I heard it. Not a voice. Not a shout. Just a sound. Low. Rough. Like someone trying not to be heard. I stopped. Just for a second. My breath caught in my throat, visible in the cold air as I turned my head slightly, listening. The alley was dark. Only one flickering light overhead casting long, broken shadows across dumpsters and wet concrete. I should have kept walking. That was the smart move. The only move. But something in that sound didn't let me go. I took one step in. Then another. Careful. Quiet. My heart started beating faster, not from fear exactly, but from instinct. The kind that tells you you're about to cross a line you can't uncross. And then I saw him. At first, he didn't look real. Just a shape against the brick wall, one knee bent, head tilted slightly forward like he'd fallen asleep sitting up. But people like him don't sleep in alleys. Not in a suit like that. Even soaked in rain, even shadowed and still, I could tell it wasn't cheap. Neither was the watch on his wrist, catching the weak light with a dull, steady shine. He didn't belong here. Which meant one thing. Something had gone very, very wrong. I hesitated. My fingers tightened inside my pockets. This was the moment. The exact moment where I could turn around, walk back out into the rain, and pretend I never saw anything. No consequences. No danger. No story. Just another night. I almost did it. I almost walked away. But then his hand moved. Barely. Just enough to prove he wasn't gone. And I don't know why, but that was all it took. I stepped closer, my pulse loud in my ears, every instinct screaming at me to stop. Hey, I whispered, my voice small against the sound of the rain. No response. I crouched down slowly, keeping my distance, eyes scanning him the way you learn to. Quick, sharp, looking for threats before anything else. His breathing was uneven. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just wrong. Like each breath cost him something. My throat tightened. This wasn't my problem. It couldn't be. But my hands were already moving, pulling off my worn scarf, pressing it gently where I thought it might help, even though I wasn't sure it would. Stay with me, I said under my breath, not even thinking about why I cared. And that's when it happened. His eyes opened. Slow. Heavy. But sharp. Too sharp. They locked onto mine like he was memorizing my face, like I was the only thing anchoring him to this moment. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. There was nothing weak about him. Nothing helpless. Even like this, even barely holding on, there was something in his gaze that felt controlled. Measured. Dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. My stomach dropped. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like I was helping someone. It felt like I had just stepped into something I didn't understand. Something I couldn't walk away from anymore. And I knew it. The second I stayed. I had already chosen. I should have pulled my hand away the second he looked at me like that, but I did not. I stayed frozen there, crouched in the cold, my scarf pressed lightly against him while the rain kept falling like it had all the time in the world. His eyes did not blink. They did not soften. They studied me, sharp and aware, like he was already deciding something I was not part of. You should leave, he said, his voice low, steady, not weak at all. And that was the first thing that made my chest tighten. People who were barely holding on did not sound like that. They did not sound in control. I swallowed, shaking my head before I even thought it through. You are not okay, I whispered, because it was obvious, because walking away now felt worse than whatever trouble I was stepping into. His gaze flickered down briefly to where my hands were, then back to my face. Calculating. Always calculating. You do not understand what you are doing, he said, slower this time, like he was choosing each word carefully. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because he was right. I did not understand anything about this. Not why a man like him was here. Not why no one else had come looking. Not why I felt like the entire city had gone quiet just for this moment. But I stayed anyway. Can you stand? I asked, ignoring the warning in his voice, shifting slightly closer despite the way every instinct inside me kept pushing back. For a second, I thought he would refuse. Then his jaw tightened, just a little, and he nodded once. That was all I needed. I moved carefully, sliding one arm under his, bracing myself as I helped him shift his weight. He was heavier than I expected. Not just physically. There was something else there. Something that felt like pressure, like standing too close to a storm you could not see yet. My shelter was not far. 2 blocks, maybe 3. A broken door, a narrow staircase. A space that barely counted as a room. But it was dry. It was hidden. It was mine. Getting him there felt longer than it should have. Every step slow. Me checking the street, the corners, the shadows. Him silent beside me, watching everything even when he barely moved. When we finally made it inside, I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. I eased him down against the wall, pulling away quickly like the contact had lasted too long. The room was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb that hummed quietly overhead. He looked out of place here, not just because of the suit, or the watch, or the way he carried himself. It was the way the space seemed to shrink around him, like it was not built to contain someone like that. I grabbed what little I had. A clean cloth. A bottle. Of water. My hands steadier than I felt as I worked in silence, doing what I could without asking questions I did not want answers to. He watched me the entire time. Not with gratitude. Not with relief. Just watching. Like he was memorizing everything. Finally, after a long moment, he spoke again. Why? Just that. One word. I paused, glancing up at him, confused by the question. Why what? I asked quietly. His eyes narrowed slightly, like I had missed something obvious. Why did you stop? The answer came easier than I expected. Because no one else did. Silence settled between us again, heavier this time. And something shifted in his expression. Not softer. Not warmer. Just different. Like he had not expected that answer. Like it did not fit into whatever world he came from. Outside, somewhere in the distance, I heard it. Faint at first. Then clearer. The low hum of engines. More than one. My stomach dropped instantly. His head tilted slightly, just enough to show he heard it too. And then, for the first time since I found him, something almost like recognition crossed his face. Not fear. Not surprise. Something else. Something colder. They found me, he said quietly. And suddenly, I realized the night was not even close to over. I felt it before I understood it, the shift in the air, the way the small space suddenly seemed too exposed, too easy to find, like the walls themselves were not enough to keep anything out. The sound of engines grew louder, slow and deliberate, not passing by, not fading away, but settling somewhere close. Too close. My hands stilled for a second, the cloth still in my grip as I looked toward the door like it might already be opening. Who is they? I asked, my voice quieter now. Careful, like saying the wrong thing might make everything worse. He did not answer right away. His eyes moved instead, scanning the room. The door, the single window, every exit I already knew was not good enough. When he looked back at me, there was no hesitation left in him at all. People who do not like to wait, he said, calm, controlled, like this was not new to him. Like this was routine. My stomach twisted. Are they here to help you? I asked, even though I already knew the answer was. No. Something in his expression almost changed. Not quite a smile. Not even close. Just a flicker of something that told me I had asked the wrong question. No, he said simply. And that was enough. Every instinct I had learned the hard way came rushing back all at once. Stay quiet. Stay small. Do not be seen. I moved quickly then, crossing the room in 2 steps and killing the light. The bulb clicked off, leaving us in dim shadow broken only by the faint glow from the street outside. My heart was beating so loud I was sure anyone nearby could hear it. Do not speak, I whispered, more to myself than to him, dropping low near the wall and motioning for him to stay still. But he did not look at me. He was listening, focused in a way I had never seen before, counting something I could not hear yet. Then I caught it. Doors closing. More than one. Slow footsteps on wet pavement. Not rushing. Not searching blindly. They knew where they were going. My chest tightened as I crawled toward the edge of the window, just enough to see without being seen. Headlights cut across the alley, long shadows stretching across the walls like reaching hands. Dark vehicles. Clean. Quiet. The kind that did not belong in this part of the city. Men stepped out. Not loud. Not careless. They moved like they had done this before, like every step had already been planned. I pulled back immediately, my breath catching. "You need to leave," I whispered urgently, turning toward him, my voice sharper now. "If they find you here, they will," he interrupted, not raising his voice, not rushing, just stating it like a fact that could not be changed. That stopped me. Completely. Because there was no fear in it. No panic. Just certainty. I stared at him, trying to understand how someone could sit there, in a place like this, with people like that outside, and still look like he was the one in control. "Then we have to move," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite myself. "There is a back exit. It is narrow, but it connects to the next building. We can." "No," the word cut through everything, quiet but absolute. I froze again, my mind struggling to catch up. "No," I repeated, disbelief creeping in. He pushed himself slightly straighter against the wall, ignoring everything his body should have been telling him not to do. And when he looked at me this time, something shifted completely. Not hidden anymore. Not subtle. Power. Quiet. Heavy. Unmistakable. "You are not running," he said. Not a suggestion. Not advice. A decision. My pulse spiked instantly. "You do not get to decide that." I shot back before I could stop myself, the words slipping out faster than my fear. For a second, the room felt too small to hold both of us. His gaze held mine, steady, unblinking, like he was weighing something deeper than just the moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat. My breath caught again, every instinct screaming at me to move, to stop him, to do something. But I did not. I could not. He pulled out a small object, dark, simple, nothing flashy about it, and placed it carefully on the floor between us. Not threatening. Not rushed. Intentional. "If anything happens," he said quietly, his voice lower now, almost protective, "you stay behind me." My mind went blank for a second. Behind him? That made no sense. Nothing about this made sense. The engines outside went silent. The footsteps stopped. And then a knock. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just 3 slow, measured taps against the door. My entire body went still. Because somehow that was worse. The sound of that knock did not belong in my world. It was too calm. Too precise. Like whoever stood on the other side of that door already knew exactly what they would find when it opened. My throat tightened as I stared at the door, my body refusing to move, every instinct screaming that this was the moment everything changed. I did not look at him, but I could feel it. The shift beside me. Not panic. Not hesitation. Something else entirely. Control. "Do not open it," I whispered, my voice barely there, like saying it louder might make it real. The silence stretched for 1 second, then 2. Another knock followed. Same rhythm. Same patience. Whoever it was, they were not in a hurry. And that terrified me more than anything. "They already know I am here," he said quietly, his tone even, as if he were explaining something simple. My head snapped toward him. "Then why are they knocking?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. "Because they are being polite." Polite. The word felt wrong. Completely wrong. Nothing about this felt polite. My chest rose and fell too fast as I looked back at the door, trying to think, trying to find any option that did not end with everything falling apart. But there were no options. Not anymore. The third knock came, softer this time, almost like a warning instead of a request. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I could run. Maybe. I could slip through the back, disappear into the next building, lose myself in streets that did not care who I was. But my feet did not move. Because he had not moved. Because he was still sitting there like the room belonged to him. Like the people outside were the ones stepping into his world, not the other way around. "Stay behind me," he said again, quieter this time, but somehow heavier. I swallowed hard, shaking my head instinctively. "You cannot even stand properly," I whispered back, frustration mixing with fear. "You cannot protect anyone." The second the words left my mouth, I knew they were wrong. Not because of what I said, but because of how he reacted. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He just looked at me. And in that look, something settled. Something final. Slowly, he pushed himself up. Not easily, not without effort, but he did it. Every movement controlled, deliberate, like even now he refused to show weakness. My breath caught as I watched him straighten, taller than I remembered, broader than he had seemed when he was sitting. The room felt smaller instantly, the air heavier. He adjusted his coat slightly, like the moment mattered more than whatever pain he was ignoring. And then he stepped forward, placing himself between me and the door without another word. I did not realize I had taken a step back until my shoulders touched the wall behind me. The distance between us changed everything. Suddenly, I was behind him, exactly where he said I would be. The fourth knock never came. Instead, a voice. Calm, clear, right on the other side of the door. Sir, the voice said, respectful, measured, like they were speaking to someone important. We have been looking for you. My eyes widened slightly as I stared. At his back, my mind trying to catch up to what I was hearing. Not threats, not demands. Respect, real respect. He did not answer right away. He just stood there, still, like he was deciding how this would play out. Then, without looking back at me, he spoke. You took your time, he said, his voice completely different now. Not quiet, not cautious, controlled in a way that filled the entire room. There was a pause on the other side, just long enough to feel intentional. We wanted to be certain, the voice replied. No mistakes. My heart pounded harder against my ribs as I looked between the door and him, something cold settling deep in my stomach. Because suddenly, this did not feel like someone being hunted. It felt like something else entirely, something I had not even considered. He reached for the door handle slowly, his hand steady, like nothing about this moment was uncertain. And just before he turned it, he spoke again, low enough that only I could hear. Whatever happens, he said, do not speak. Then the door opened, and the world I thought I understood shifted completely. The door opened without a sound, like even the hinges knew better than to draw attention, and for a second, everything outside went still. The rain was still falling, I could hear it, but it felt distant now, like it belonged to a different world. 3 men stood just beyond the threshold, all in dark suits. Clean, sharp, completely out of place in a building like this. But they did not look around in confusion. They did not hesitate. Their eyes went straight to him. And then something happened that made my breath catch. They lowered their heads. Not fully, not dramatically, just enough to show respect. Real respect. Sir, the one in the center said again, his voice steady, controlled, like he had said that word 1,000 times before and meant it every single time. We apologize for the delay. I felt my fingers press harder into the wall behind me, grounding myself as I tried to process what I was seeing. This was not a rescue. This was not a search. This was something else. He did not step forward. He did not greet them. He just stood there, tall, unmoving, like they were the ones who had entered his space uninvited. You are late, he said, his tone calm but heavy, the kind of calm that carried weight behind it. No one argued. No one explained. The man in the center simply nodded once. It will not happen again. Silence followed. Thick, controlled. I watched as his gaze moved past them, scanning the alley beyond, like he was checking something I could not see. Then his attention shifted slightly, just enough for me to notice. Not toward them, toward me. He did not turn. He did not say my name. But somehow I felt it. The awareness. The decision. The moment something about me became part of this. Inside, he said finally, stepping back just enough to allow them through. They entered without a word, their presence filling the small room instantly, making it feel even smaller than before. One of them closed the door behind him carefully, like even that small sound mattered. My heart was still racing, my mind struggling to catch up, to understand why men like this were standing in my space like it belonged to them. Or worse, like it belonged to him. Status? He asked, his voice low again, but no less commanding. The man in front answered immediately. The situation has been contained. No further complications are expected. I did not know what that meant. I was not sure I wanted to. But the way they spoke, the way they stood, it all pointed to something I could not ignore anymore. He was not just important. He was the center of everything happening right now. My gaze dropped briefly to the floor, to the small object he had placed there earlier, then back up to him, trying to piece together something that made sense. It did not. Nothing about this made sense. And her? Another man asked suddenly, his voice quieter, careful, like the question itself needed permission. My entire body went still. My eyes snapped toward them, then back to him, panic rising fast and sharp in my chest. For a split second, no one spoke. The room held its breath. Then he turned. Slowly, deliberately. His eyes met mine again, and this time, there was no confusion left in me about what I was looking at. Not a stranger. Not someone in trouble. Something else entirely. Something bigger. She stays, he said. Just 3 words. Calm. Final. No explanation. No hesitation. The reaction was immediate. Subtle, but there. The men did not question it. They did not look surprised. They simply accepted it. Like his word was not something anyone argued with. My heart pounded harder, my mind racing as I tried to understand what that meant. Stays? With who? With him. Sir, the first man said carefully, it may not be safe. Safe. The word echoed in my head, twisting into something unfamiliar. He did not even glance at him. She is under my protection, he replied, his voice quieter now, but somehow even more absolute. And just like that, everything changed. Because in that moment, I realized something I had not seen before. I had not just helped the wrong man. I had stepped into the life of someone who did not ask. Someone who decided. And for reasons I did not understand, he had just decided about me. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words did not make sense in my head, not with the way my life worked, not with the rules I had survived by for years. People like me did not get protected. We stayed invisible or we got hurt. There was nothing in between. And yet, no one in that room questioned him. Not one of them. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was agreement. Immediate. Absolute. My chest tightened as I pushed myself off the wall. The movement small, but enough to remind me I was still here, still part of this whether I understood it or not. I am not staying. I said before I could stop myself, my voice sharper than I intended, cutting through the heavy quiet. Every head in the room turned toward me at once. Not aggressively, not threatening, but aware, watching, measuring. It made my skin prickle instantly. I had said too much. I knew it the second it left my mouth. But I could not take it back. I would not. His gaze shifted to me slowly, like everything he did, controlled and deliberate. There was no anger there. That somehow made it worse. You do not decide that, he said, his tone even, not raised, not harsh, just final. The same way he had spoken before. Like outcomes were not discussions. They were facts. My pulse spiked again, frustration rising to meet the fear that had not left me since the moment I found him. You cannot just walk into my life and decide things for me. I shot back, my hands tightening at my sides as I forced myself to hold his gaze. You do not even know me. A small pause followed. Not from uncertainty, from consideration. His eyes stayed on mine, steady, unblinking, like he was studying something deeper than the words I had just said. I know enough, he replied quietly. That stopped me. Not because it made sense, but because of how certain he sounded. Like whatever he had seen in the few minutes we had known each other was already enough for him to make decisions that would change everything for me. I shook my head slightly, taking a step back, needing space, needing something that felt like control again. No, I said, softer now but no less firm. I am not part of whatever this is. I helped you. That is all. The words felt thin the second I said them. Because nothing about this felt that simple anymore. Not with the way those men stood around him. Not with the way they looked at him like he was the center of everything. Not with the way he looked at me now. That is not all, he said. My breath caught again. There was no edge in his voice. No threat. Just truth. The kind that settles whether you accept it or not. You saw me, he continued, taking a slow step forward, closing part of the distance I had just created. You stayed. Each word landed heavier than the last. That changes things. I swallowed hard, my mind racing for an argument that did not sound as weak as the ones already forming in my head. It should not, I said, but even I could hear it. The uncertainty, the doubt. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Something had changed the second I made that choice. I just had not realized how much. One of the men shifted slightly, stepping closer but not interrupting, his presence a quiet reminder that none of this was happening in isolation. That this was bigger than just me and him. Always bigger. Sir, he said carefully, we should move. This location is not secure. Secure. The word echoed again, pulling my attention back to everything I did not understand. He did not look away from me when he answered. Prepare the car, he said. My stomach dropped instantly. Car. Movement. Leaving. My space. My only space. Wait, I said quickly, the word coming out faster than I could stop it. His eyes flickered slightly, just enough to show he heard me. I am not going anywhere with you. I added, my voice steadier now, even as everything inside me felt anything but steady. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not softer. Not kinder. Just more certain. You already are, he said quietly. And that was the moment I realized something I had been avoiding since the beginning. This was never about asking. It was about timing. And I had already run out of it. The word car echoed in my head louder than it should have, like it carried more weight than just a vehicle waiting outside. It meant leaving. It meant stepping out of the only place I understood into something I did not. I shook my head again, more forcefully this time, taking another step back until I felt the edge of the room behind me. No, I said, my voice steadier now, even as my heart refused to slow down. You do not get to decide where I go. The room did not react the way I expected. No one stepped forward. No one raised their voice. They just watched, waiting, not for me, for him. His gaze stayed on mine, unwavering, like everything I said was already accounted for before I even spoke it. If you stay here, he said calmly, they will come back. My breath caught slightly. Who? I asked, even though I knew better than to expect a clear answer. The ones who were looking for me, he replied. Simple, direct, final. My stomach tightened again as I glanced toward the door, toward the alley beyond it, imagining those quiet cars, those careful footsteps returning. That is not my problem, I said quickly, holding on to the only thing that made sense. I did not ask for any of this. His expression did not change, not even a flicker. No, he agreed quietly. But you are part of it now. The words landed harder than I expected, because they felt true, whether I wanted them to be or not. I opened my mouth to argue again, but nothing came out, because every option I tried to build in my head led back to the same place. There was no version of this where things went back to how they were before. Not anymore. One of the men stepped slightly closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough to remind me that time was moving forward whether I accepted it or not. The car is ready, he said. I felt the shift again. Not in them. In him. Decision settling into place. He turned slightly, just enough to signal something without saying it out loud. The men moved immediately, efficient, silent, like this was routine. Like they had done this 100 times before. I watched them, my chest tight, my thoughts racing, trying to find something, anything that would give me control again. If I go with you, I said suddenly, the words surprising even me. What happens next? The room stilled again. Not because the question was unexpected, but because of who I had asked it to. His eyes returned to mine, slower this time, like he was considering how much to say. You stay somewhere safe, he answered. Safe. That word again. It sounded different coming from him. Not soft. Not comforting. Controlled. Structured. Like safety was something he created, not something that just existed. I shook my head slightly, disbelief creeping in. Safe for who? I asked quietly. Another pause. Then, for you. Something in my chest shifted at that. Not trust. Not acceptance. Just something I could not name yet. I looked at him, really looked this time, past the suit, past the control, past everything that made him feel untouchable. And for the first time, I saw it. Not weakness. Not exactly. But a crack. Small. Almost invisible. Like he was carrying something heavier than everything around him. And somehow, I had stepped into it. My hands relaxed slightly at my sides, my shoulders dropping just enough to show I was no longer fighting the moment as hard as I had been. And if I say no? I asked, quieter now. He did not hesitate this time. Then I stay, he said. My eyes widened slightly. Here? I asked, disbelief slipping through. He nodded once. Simple. Certain. Until it is no longer dangerous for you. The room seemed to shrink again, but in a different way this time. Not because of fear, because of what he was offering, or maybe what he was deciding. I looked around my space, at the cracked walls, the dim light, the life I had built piece by piece just to survive. Then back at him, at the men waiting, at the world I did not understand, but was already standing in. My heart pounded once, twice. Then I took a slow breath. Fine, I said quietly. Not agreement, not surrender, just a step. His gaze held mine for a second longer. Then he turned toward the door. "We are leaving," he said. And this time, no part of me tried to stop him. The hallway felt longer than it had ever been before, every step echoing in a way that made it clear this was no longer just a place I passed through. It was something I was leaving behind. I did not look back at the room. I could not, because if I did, I might stop. And I had already made it clear I was not going to stop him. The air outside hit colder than before, the rain lighter now but still steady, clinging to everything, turning the alley into a reflection of dull light and shadows. The cars were waiting exactly where I had seen them before. Dark, quiet, unmistakable. The kind of vehicles that did not belong to people like me. One of the men moved ahead, opening the rear door with a smooth motion that felt practiced, effortless. Not rushed. Never rushed. I hesitated at the edge of the sidewalk, my feet slowing just enough to remind me that I still had a choice, even if it felt smaller than it had minutes ago. "You can still walk away," I said, not looking at him this time, my voice low but clear. I was not sure if I meant him or myself. There was a brief pause beside me. Then, "No," he said. Just that. No explanation. No hesitation. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding, the last piece of resistance slipping quietly out of me. Not gone. Just quieter. I stepped forward. The interior of the car was warmer, softer, a sharp contrast to everything outside. Clean lines. Dark leather. The faint scent of something expensive I could not name. I slid in slowly, careful, aware of everything, my hands resting in my lap like I was trying to take up as little space as possible. He followed a second later, the door closing behind him with a muted sound that felt final in a way I could not ignore. The world outside dimmed instantly, the noise of the rain fading to a distant rhythm against the glass. For a moment, no one spoke. The car began to move, smooth and steady, like the city itself was making way for it. I kept my eyes forward at first, watching the blurred shapes of buildings pass by, streetlights stretching into lines of gold against the wet roads. It did not feel real. None of it did. Then I looked at him. He sat beside me like he belonged there, like this was his world, and I had simply stepped into it by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. His posture was relaxed, controlled, like nothing about the night had unsettled him. Not the alley. Not the waiting man. Not me. I shifted slightly, turning just enough to face him more directly. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice quieter now, not challenging, just needing to understand something. He did not answer right away. His gaze remained forward, focused on something beyond the windshield, beyond the streets, beyond anything I could see. Then, slowly he spoke. "Somewhere you will not be found." The words settled heavily between us. Not comforting, not reassuring, just true. I swallowed, my fingers tightening slightly in my lap as I processed that. Not be found. That meant something I was not ready to fully understand yet. "And after that?" I asked, pushing just a little further, because if I was already here, already part of this, then I needed something to hold on to. This time, he turned his head, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light of the car. There was something different in his gaze now. Not softer, but less distant. Like I was no longer just an interruption. "After that," he said slowly, "we see what you become." My breath caught again, confusion mixing with something deeper, something sharper. "What I become," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. He held my gaze for a second longer, then looked away, back toward the road ahead. "You stepped into my world," he said quietly. "It changes people." The city lights continued to pass by, faster now, brighter, like I was being pulled further away from everything I knew with every second that passed. I leaned back slightly, my head resting against the seat, my eyes drifting back to the window. My reflection stared back at me, faint and unfamiliar against the dark glass. Because for the first time, I was not sure who I was anymore, or who I was about to become. The city changed the further we drove. I could feel it before I fully saw it, the way the streets grew quieter, cleaner, like the chaos I knew had been left behind somewhere miles ago. The buildings stretched higher, the lights steadier, everything more controlled. I pressed my fingers lightly against the door beside me, grounding myself as the car slowed, then turned, then finally came to a smooth stop. For a second, no one moved. Then the door opened. Not by me. Never by me. One of his men stood outside, holding it open, waiting. Always waiting. I hesitated again, just for a breath, before stepping out. The air here felt different. Still cold, still night, but sharper somehow. The kind of place where people did not look over their shoulders every 5 seconds. The kind of place I had never belonged to. I looked up slowly. The building in front of me was not just big. It was deliberate. Clean glass, dark steel, lights placed exactly where they needed to be. No signs. No noise. Just presence. This is where you live. I asked quietly, not sure why I needed to ask out loud. He stepped out behind me, adjusting his coat slightly like he had done this 1,000 times before. Sometimes, he replied. Of course. Nothing about him was ever simple. I followed as he walked forward, my steps slower, more cautious, my eyes taking in everything without meaning to. The doors opened before we reached them. No hesitation. No question. Inside, everything felt even more removed from the world I knew. Marble floors. Soft lighting. Silence that was not empty, but intentional. Every movement echoed just enough to remind me I was somewhere important. Somewhere controlled. I stayed half a step behind him without realizing it, my body adjusting to the rhythm of his world before my mind could catch up. The elevator doors slid open instantly. No button pressed. No waiting. Just access. We stepped inside, and as the doors closed, I felt it again. That shift. The one that told me there was no easy way back from here. The elevator moved smoothly, almost too smoothly, the numbers climbing without a sound. I kept my eyes forward at first, then slowly turned toward him. Why me? I asked, the question finally pushing its way out after everything that had happened. He did not answer right away. His reflection stared back at both of us in the polished steel walls, calm, unreadable, like he was weighing something again. Then, quietly, because you did not run. I let out a small breath, shaking my head slightly. That is not enough, I said. People help each other all the time. His eyes shifted to mine, and this time, there was something there I had not seen before. Not softer, not warmer, but honest. No, he said. They do not. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened onto a space that did not feel like a hallway. It felt like an entire floor. Open, quiet, designed with the same precision as everything else around him. He stepped out first. I followed, slower this time, my eyes moving across the room, trying to take it all in, trying to understand where I was now. You will stay here, he said, his voice returning to that controlled calm, the one that left no room for argument. I turned toward him, my chest tightening again. For how long? I asked. He paused. Just for a second. Then, until I know you are safe. Safe. That word again. It followed me here, just like everything else. I looked around once more, at the space, at him, at the distance between the life I had and the one I had just stepped into. Then back at him. And after that, I asked quietly. He held